Alright, so, for those of you who don't know, my name is Oddball, and this is a sort of running the game aftermath. This series will be my thoughts on my current progress in my D&D game. So yesterday we had session 5 of Yarhar Thursdays, which is the title of my campaign because it takes place in a heavily water-centric archipelago known as the Uralt Archipelago. And the cast of characters started off as sort of pirates. Session 1 was a bit of a short session that I used to get a feel for the characters and the world, which I had played in before, but this was a new section of the world which I had not explored before. So it was out at sea, introduce all the characters, and then they encounter a rival pirate clan on a ship that they get into a bit of a conflict with. And then while they're in conflict with this ship, they eventually defeat them, and they loot their ship, and they find this treasure map. On this treasure map are 6 symbols, even though I had only originally drawn 4 of them on. And each of these 6 symbols represented a different island in the archipelago. So they're close to this sort of green, brown, I don't remember the color, but symbol, and they say, Captain Annabelle, mark a course. And it was like a 2-hour session, and everyone was kind of really disappointed that it was so short, and we quickly, the next week, we had session 2, which I had called the Isla de la Terra, because as they arrived on the island, it was pretty much uninhabited. They encountered some guard drakes. Cien, our monk wrestler, had ran off into the jungle, and he had run into a guard drake nest. And after a bit of conflict there, that was quickly de-escalated by the dragonborn paladin of Carnepsis, who is the dragon god of time, allegedly. Time and death and all that. They de-escalated the conflict, and they encountered some other weird things. I believe they ran into a large wooden construct man, who I believe they slapped on the butt a few times. We all realized that their fighter, the bugbear, was actually a mute, because I apparently did not read his thing well enough the first time. His bio. And they did encounter a small treetop village of green kobolds, who invited them up to drink of their broth and explained to them that there was a temple on this island dedicated to the earth, and that it was currently corrupted by what the party would later find out would be vegapygmies, moldies. So, those of them that drank of the broth became immune to poison, because they're level 2 at this point, and I'm aware that moldies are low CR, but they can TPK a party pretty easy, and I'm looking to introduce them to D&D monsters and the possibility of death, but I'm not looking to actually kill them right away. So eventually they do end up defeating all of the moldies and finding this green gem amulet, which is quickly snatched up by the monk San Montoya, who puts it around his neck, and unbeknownst to him, he connects himself to an extremely ancient, powerful artifact. And they come to realize that each of these 6... oh no, they were told by the dryad who is living at the entrance of the cave that each of those symbols represented a different totem: fire, water, earth, air, spirit, and death. And each of the totems were placed on a different temple around Uralt, and that they were all related, but she herself didn't know quite how. So the party recovers themselves and they return to their ship after discovering that, upon taking the amulet, the Dryad and allegedly the Woodwoad, but I don't believe they ever encountered him again, or encountered anything about him again, so they don't know what happened to him. But the Dryad definitely disappeared, and her tree had turned to ash once they had left. They returned to their ship, and session 3 I had planned to be a bit of a festival to get them, introduced to one of the towns of Uralt. So they had the Summer's Crest Festival, which takes place on the 21st day of Jordas, which is the month that our campaign started in. It was, I believe, 7 days after the first session in game time. And they all ended up at the Uralt, at the island of Solace, where they entered the Brawler's Birth gladiatorial pit fight arena thing, in which they won, I think, a total of 1,000 gold for defeating a Minotaur. I believe it was 4 direwolves and 2 flail snails in succession, not all at once. But they won 1,000 gold, split between 4 of them because their bugbear friend had disappeared that day because real life happens. But yeah, and then they met a bunch of shopkeepers. They met a glorious tailor who Cien became quickly attached to. They met a purple-haired woman who had appeared several times on the island in different places, but she ran a magic shop, and her name was Shantae, and that her magic shop was called the Pirate's Curse, which, if any of you have played the games Shantae Half Genie Hero, or Shantae the Pirate's Curse, it is a direct reference to her being a genie, and she runs a magic shop. She has simulacrums, and she is powerful genie, high-level magic user for the party to be acquainted with, because I've found that knowing a high-level magic user in a campaign is pretty helpful. While all this was going on, the Arbard, Grace Winthrop, she was approached by a small child of Drow origin, who asked her if she knew who Asher was. And after some digging, she found that Asher was a tiefling fighter in the arena, and that he was actually her uncle, her long-lost uncle, who her parents had never told her about. And that he had been basically eradicated from their family because he did not follow the same god that they did, the Lord, and instead followed the Lawbearer, I believe. I'd have to check my notes, but I believe that is the case. And that because this religious difference, he was actually removed from the family and wiped when Grace was only like 3 years old. So she reconnects with this person, but in order to meet with him, she meets with a pale gentleman with black hair and a black tank top, but yellow eyes. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, yellow eyes are not normal for humanoids, humans. They are normal for things like tieflings or Aasimar or extraplanar entities, but humans and elves normally don't have yellow eyes. So that was one of the warning flags that you should not trust this man. The other was the ominous tattoo of a black hand on his shoulder that was... Oh wow, look at that. Anyway, that was very visible, and a check could have told you it belonged to a criminal organization, but Naive little Grace didn't make any checks, and she agreed to do a favor for this man. So, session 4 begins telling Kargash's tale. Kargash, while he was away, went with Captain Annabelle to speak with a pawnbroker friend of hers who had sent word to her at the docks that he had gotten into a bit of trouble and that he needed some assistance in dealing with an organization called the Black Hand. If you're noticing a pattern, there's a reason. So Kargash is accompanied by 4 individuals. He is basically sold by Annabelle to these individuals for temporary employment, because, I mean, he's a member of her crew and he's mute, he can't really say no, and, well, the story demanded it, so that's kind of what I went with. I probably could have thought about it a bit more, but I didn't really get notice that he wasn't going to be there that week. Kind of missed me. Anyway, so, Kargash is with these individuals who I hand out 4 character sheets to the players who were not able to play their characters right then, and they play these alternate characters, and they go through a sort of burglary of this, I believe it was the Lawmaster of Solace, the sort of mayor-type individual, and they murder all of his guards brutally because they failed at being stealthy completely after being attacked by a trap known as a Rug of Smothering, which is a fun D&D monster that I was happy to get to use. But they are attacked by this rug, and combat ensues. They're hunted down by a very large amount of guards, and eventually they do manage to find what they're looking for, which is this ledger, which was wanted by the Black Hand, which 2 of the group members were a part of. Endora Clapp, who was from the island of Zion, as well as Langland the Small, who was also from the island of Zion, but he was an orphan, and he was actually a pretty high-ranking member of the Black Hand already. There was also Zur Morden, who was a blue dragonborn with white dragon ancestry. He worked for the Grand Rashid Green, who had been around in Uralt searching for something called the Heart of Null. And then I believe there was also Reed Vance, who was a drow cleric of the Masked Lord, the Living God, the one of the 2 remaining drow gods in my world, Iran. And these characters were all basically just lore dumps to get them a lot of information on the world pretty quickly, the players' information on the world pretty quickly, and to introduce them to foreign places and concepts as well as local ones, because you want to make your worlds, I like to think that you want to make your world seem bigger, even if at the small level it isn't as fleshed out. If it feels like there's a lot to explore, then maybe they'll go out. It's the Skyrim or the ESO method of each little area is part of a bigger pocket, but you can visit these areas for now, and maybe you'll get to visit these other ones later. You know. So, after ending the day prior session, Kargash gets an hand axe of returning, 150 gold. Then we have a little shopping episode where everyone just buys stuff. At some, I believe it was in session 3, but Balasar got an enchanted sword, which it was made of silver and it glue in the dark, so fixing the no light problem for the party, as well as giving him a silvered weapon, which is pretty important in D&D, and hasn't come up yet, but will come up in the future because silvered weapons are, magic resistance gets thrown to the side, and, I did tease them with a little homebrew thing I'm working on called a were-shark, because it's a highly aquatic based campaign. I mean, it's kind of something I wanted to do. So, plus a friend of mine had mentioned a character that wasn't were-shark already, and I wanted to get in on that action because it seemed a little fun. So, that brings us to last game. At the end of session 4, not quite last game, at the end of session 4, Balasar and Grace went to talk to Asher, and I was dead tired and didn't really have a plan, so it was a really awkward conversation, but at some point Balasar goes, oh, because they had slept, and during the night, Grace had been visited by Langland, the small halfling Black Hand member, and she had been taken outside and clubbed over the back of the head. As the gentleman, the dark-haired or yellow-eyed gentleman had spoken to her and said that he finally had what he needed, the blood of the Lord, and she got clubbed in the back of the head and woke up in her bed with a funny taste in her mouth and feeling just bleh. Like, she wasn't hungry, she wasn't tired, she wasn't anything, and this persisted through the day. So, while they're talking to Asher, Balasar gets the idea to cast Divine Sense. Divine Sense lets you know of any aberrations, celestials, fae, fiends, or undead. Now, Grace and Asher are both tieflings, however you pronounce it. So, he detects 3 things in the room with them. 1. Asher registers as a fiend because he is a tiefling. 2. Balasar registers as a celestial presence because he is a paladin and has celestial magic. Kokiri, the small Kenku bird who was a friend of Asher's, registers as a fae. They don't know why, but there is a reason. But Grace does not register as a fiend, and that has to be specifically mentioned, and it sort of light bulbs go off in everyone's head, and I did not think about this. Session 5. We start off the session same way we always do. I hadn't had a chance to prepare an intro, so I was already thrown off. My production value went from a C to a D-, and it made me kind of like, ooh, okay, this is getting off to a rough start, but let's turn it around. If only. Balasar casts Detect Magic. What does Detect Magic do? Well, it lets you know the school of any magic. It lets you know if any magic is affecting something in a 30-foot area around you, and it lets you know the school of magic. Grace is standing next to him, and she pings as illusion magic. Suddenly, the plan to go to the second totem is in question, and that's what I had planned for the session to be, and the quest to find this organization that had kidnapped her and save her, because apparently she's been kidnapped and she has had a vision of a hell, basically. She had a vision of a red-skied, black cracked stones with an obsidian gate with a 3-headed dog. and a large chained tower in the background. She had a vision like that, and she's having visions of hell, and she's been kidnapped, and oh my god, we need to find her because something is not right, and for some reason this didn't click to me. And they go to their genie friend, and their genie is like, I don't want anything to do with the gentleman, that yellow-eyed bastard. Like, he is bad news. Oh, hell to the no. They get a name drop for the demon that he is trying to summon. He's trying to free from his prison in Avernus, because some time ago he was imprisoned in Avernus by Asmodeus, allegedly. And that he is currently chained up in the obsidian tower that they, or the black tower that they saw. And that Malice, Malice, is the demon, and that he is currently serving this demon somehow. So, here I am, losing my mind trying to figure out how I'm going to get them to not derail everything, because as much as I like to say it's an open world campaign, I do have them, each session I have to set up, and I have it on rails, but what they do in the session should be fine. It's sort of loose, and I need to work on it, but I'm losing my mind, and eventually they're like, okay, let's just go to the water temple. Like, we don't know where Grace is. She could be anywhere. But let's go. And they get on their ship, and they begin sailing. And I'm like, okay. Okay, brain, what can we do to make sure they stay on the rails now? What can we do to make sure that they don't get thrown off track too much? They roll a random encounter because they're on the sea for a very long time, and they roll some mermaids sun tanning on a beach, and that's like, okay, cool, that's a peaceful encounter. It's pretty, they can look at it, and that'll be like 15 minutes of filler or so as we talk about it, and we do some on-ship descriptions, and one of my players goes, oh yeah, we should probably get ready for combat because Audie doesn't like mermaids. Ding! I don't like mermaids. I think mermaids are evil. Evil mermaids. D&D has a thing for that. So, they jump into combat with some marrow, as an ominous fog rolls in and their captain gets thrown overboard as a sort of comedic way to enter combat. So they fight these marrow, and there's one on deck, but their ship begins to... other way around. Their ship begins to slowly sink, and they're like, oh, they're water creatures. They can sink our ship. So they finish combat with the ones on the boat, on the deck of the boat, and they run down, and their ship is just full of holes as these harpoons have just slammed into their ship, and they're just taking on water. And then they notice that they are nearing a glowing gate, a glowing magic circle or square in the water. And I say, you all have one round to do something. What would you like to do? I'm thinking they'll say something along the lines of, we try and patch a hole or something. But they all, Titanic moment, Balasar plays his bagpipes, Grace gets her accordion out, Horatio, our ranger, is singing, and they, in their sunken ship, go through a planar rift. And about 3 or 4 hours later, they all awaken on a shipwrecked version of their ship on Eclipso's Madness, sunk and crashed into some reefs as their barrels of lemons and oranges that they had looted and stolen slowly float away. Cien runs off and collapses under a coconut tree. A coconut falls on his head and knocks him unconscious. Kargash wanders off to search some beach caves. Horatio, the simulacrum, duplicate of Grace, and I'm forgetting someone. Horatio, oh, Balasar, and Balasar are all on set upon a blue-skinned, scaled, gilled man with an impeccable jawline and a very familiar-looking body to a lot of our players, because this man is a Triton version of Gaston, who I had found an image of online, and I fell in love with it. So Fishgone, as I had named him, explains that they have shipwrecked on an island, and that when they show them their map, he's like, this isn't, like, this island, the blue one that you were heading to, is where we are, but I don't recognize any of these other islands, so, like, that's weird. Also, hey, my village is over here, you should come over here. Anyway, I'll don't stay out too late, there's a hag that we have a problem with. And then he gives them the greeting of his people, and walks off, and after some angry screams from my players that they're going to kill the entire village because of their greeting, they all return to Kargash, tugging on their shoulders because he's mute, and apparently that is a thing he did, and they enter the sea cave with him, in which he had found some ancient-like carvings depicting 6 individuals wielding totem-like things sealing off this ancient demon type entity. And that's where we ended the session. Oh, no. And they began to hear grinding stones, and that's where they ended the session. So yes, that was sort of the story so far-ish thing, and I'm not sure that this sort of campaign diary really explained much, but it got me to get my thoughts and feelings off my chest for you guys to hopefully get a quick summary of, and I don't know, I think I will eventually get better at doing these, but this was more of a rant for me, that I could express what I was dissatisfied with to myself mainly, and I can use that to work on the campaign and make it better in the future. And I think I'm going to try and do one of these after every session now instead of every 5, because that was a lot to recount. Oh boy. But yeah, anyone who watched, thank you for watching, and I will hopefully see you again soon. Bye.